Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are, at what time, whatever time you're listening to this lecture. So, in today's lecture, I'm going to be covering some string-related methods. These are pre-existing that we're going to see how to go about using them, and then we're going to cover exceptions. So string, hopefully you had a chance to, oops, let me make it full screen here. Hopefully you had a chance to go through the last lecture when we started talking about strings. And as I mentioned, this is one of my interesting topics to talk about. We can go on and on about strings, but probably should keep it short because not everyone's going to be as interested as me, or maybe you are. I just won't know it because it's a virtual setting. So we'll cover those and then I'll go into exceptions. Exceptions is pretty basic and pretty important to any language that you're working in. If you haven't taken a language before, you worked at it or looked at it, um, then exceptions will be of a big use to you. I still continue to use exceptions up till this day, and I don't see the usage of exceptions disappearing anytime soon. So you'll be, rest. You can be assured that the exceptions are not going anywhere and they're going to be used for a very long time to come. And they're mostly in the try-catch methodology. So if you haven't, sometimes people say, hey, you have a try-catch block in your code, or they say exceptions, but if you hear the try-catch block terminology, it's referring to exceptions. Okay, so let me just dig into it, go right into it. So there are three methods that you're going to see covered today. Um, the get line, okay, and the empty method. The get line method, and this is the syntax of it. So whenever you see a method, whatever comes before the name of the method is the return type. So in our case, get line returns a iStream, okay, as an input stream as a return type, and whatever you see between these parentheses is the input. So getLine method returns an input stream, or I should say an argument to an input stream. So um, by reference or by value is something we're going to be covering later on. But anytime you see this ampersand sign, it actually means it's not a copy of it. It's a reference to the um, actual object. And if you change that in the source, it will get changed automatically throughout the program. Anyways, minus that call by reference and call by value or return by value, etc. It take so it returns an input stream and it takes in three arguments or three parameters: an input stream, a string, and a delimiting character. What that means is the first argument is the input stream. In our cases, it's going to be cin for all practical purposes. And then the second argument is where you're going to store it to. So you're going to read from the input stream and store it in str. And the getLine function is going to keep reading again and again until you hit the delimiting character. So you could have a dot, a new line, end of file, any characters, whether you can see it on the screen or not. Like the enter character, you don't see it, whereas the escape, etc., you see those. So that doesn't matter. You can say be the delimiting character could be anything you want. It could be a dot or it could be a letter. Depends on how far you want to go when you're getting the input. So, like I said, three parameters or two, or if you can choose not to give it a delimiting character, so in that case, most likely it's going to go till the new line character. Um, and the first two arguments are still the same, an input stream and a string where you want to copy it to the destination. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. If not, we'll cover some examples for getLine that's going to make it more clear. The third function is the empty function. And as the word suggests, it will give the result of a string if it's empty or not. So the results comes back as a Boolean, one or zero. True if it's empty, false if it's not. And if you recall, a Boolean is it's a little tangent here. A Boolean is just is built on C. Um, it's one or a zero. One is true. Zero is false. So that's what it returns. But for us on our side, it shows us as true or false. Now, you could we looked at the size and the length method um, for finding out the length of the string. You could use that as well, but you don't have to use an empty method. You could use the other two, but just so you know, these methods exist and are readily available for you to use them. Okay. Um, so having said that, let me just go. So having said that, let me just dive into some examples of these three functions. I'm sure you'll find them useful. Okay. Um, well, that's the second example. The first example is obviously, well, let's go through this one, right? So include input output stream, include string.h. Sometimes I put a dot at the end, but what that dot signifies is it's the header file dot h. Typically, if you have a header file where you just have the names of the method, and in the .cpp file you have the implementations of those methods. We haven't covered those, but at some point you'll see them. So if you see this terminology, hopefully you don't get thrown off by it. Okay, so using namespace std, pretty standard. That's what I've been using. Um, so this is a C++ program that takes in your name and outputs it using the getLine um, uh, method. Um, so here I'm just declaring a username, string username, and then I say, hey, what is your name? And then I see in the username. I'll I'll go ahead and start using getLine, but see what happens. Because this is the typical way that we've been used to so far. So I'll run this program. Say, hey, what's your name? Zisha. Welcome to the getLine program. And then it says Zishan. That's what my name was. I could have said getLine. I'll start off with two arguments. And if you recall, it takes in the input stream, in my case, and it's going to be the CN. And where is the destination? It is the username. I'll just leave it as it is. Let's see the impact. Right? Same as before. It output my username. I go by my middle name if you guys don't know it so far. I think I had mentioned it before in either in this, not in the syllabus, somewhere. I forget exactly where it's at. Um, okay, so it's gonna read until the new line character, right? That's what I said. I'm just gonna type in a bunch of garbage, right in up till the new line. Bunch of garbage, same thing. Now, if I need a delimiting character, I can say this. Okay, so read until the new line. The impact should be the same. Zishan T, right? It's gonna read up till the new line, including the spaces. What I could have said is read until a dot. So if I have a dot in the name, it's going to stop reading at that point. Let's do this. Muhammad dot Zishan. What do you think is going to happen? Right? I have Muhammad dot Zishan, and my delimiting character is a dot. It should stop reading at the dot, right? See, it says Muhammad, and it stopped reading at the dot. So that's my delimiting character. I could have had, let's say if I put a E over there, okay? I want to read in up until I see the letter E. Hey, it saw E and it stopped right there. So these are the different ways that you can use the get line method. You could use cin, like I'm not restricting you not to use it, but just so you know, get line is a method that's out there, and and this is open for you to be able to use it. Okay. Hopefully that's clear. Try it out, like as I always say. Not clear, any questions, just feel free to bug me, and I can reply in an email, text, or have a Zoom meeting, WebEx meeting, whatever, just to make sure you're clear and comfortable with this. Okay. Um, then what I'm going to do is let me continue on and show you another example. This one's a little bit more involved, where this uses the a few more methods. Okay. It's got a flush method in there, peak method in there, is space. Now, uh, the peak method, the ignore, and the is space, um, you're used to it, right? You've seen those before. But the flush method is new. Um, so let me just what flush does what flush does is flush. Okay, so I have this flush method here. Let me just take it out. So here, what I'm trying to do is I'm gonna ask the user to enter in a number, and then I'm gonna see in that number, read it, and while it fails, so see in that fail, it's gonna fail. It's either gonna fail or not fail, a Boolean. Okay. I've asked for a short number, and if the user enters in, let's say, for example, characters or string, it's gonna fail. Then um, I clear the buffer of any errors, etc. that are in there, and then I peek um, to the next character. And if it's not the new line character, then I ignore. Okay. And then I go into this while loop, while C and peek. If it's not the new line character, most likely the user has entered in a bunch of characters followed by spaces, etc. So I ignore that again. Um, and if I have gone through this if loop, okay, if I've gone through all of it and I hit the new line character and I have kept ignoring it, I tried peeking it, ignoring it, etc. Chances are he is trying to enter non-numeric digits, characters, or something else. And I say, hey, invalid numeric format, please try again. Okay? Um, so this goes on in this if else, what happens is, let's say we'll start off again, right? So while I'm failing, I clear the buffer, peek if it's not the new line, ignore it, see if it's not the new line, and try to ignore all the spaces. That's what I'm basically doing in here. And if I haven't uh, read through the new line, uh, right? If I haven't reached that, chances are the number magnitude is just way too large. And I let the user know. Okay? And so he can enter in another number. And watch here. This is the else part. And then I see in the number again. And this is the closing brace for the while loop. So all of this stuff goes on. So essentially the way to think about it is if the user well, all I'm trying to do is take in an input from the user, which is a short number, and if the user does not enter that, um, a short number, I try to give him guidance. If he's entering characters, I let him know it's invalid numeric format, or if he's entering a number which is way large, because short is a small set of integers, right? One, two, etc. I mean, it can't be a number in millions or hundreds of thousands, etc. And if that's the case, then I let the user know. So the idea behind this program is to give some kind of give guidance to the user, um, or parses input in a manner that you ignore the white space, and if it's characters, you let him know, or if the number is too large, you let him know. So let me run this. Um, enter a value. I'll do this. All bunch of characters. Invalid numeric format. Please try again. If I were to just enter in a whole large number, okay? number magnitude too large, try again. I do 12, 212, you enter 212. Awesome. Try that once again, right? So if it's all spaces, right, it's, and I put EE, ignore all the spaces. I tried to read an EE, invalid format, please try again. See, that's a short number. So in essence, that's what the program is trying to do. Okay, hopefully that was clear. Next up, what I wanted to do was I've added a few things in this slide here. Um, are these two methods, this the string and these type of parentheses and a number in between. That's one format. The other one is string.at, and then in parentheses you have a integer. So these two methods are used to get to a specific position in the string. So if you go back and when we initially started talking about strings, I said string is built on C character. It's an it's a bunch of characters together, and each one of those character can be accessed via string and give it a number or string.add method. Now there's a slight difference between the two notations that we're going to see later on, but from a basic syntax perspective, if you're trying to get to a specific character in a string, this is how you go about doing it. Let me show you here. Um, so here I have this program. Okay, I have a string s, which is hello world, and then I say cout s open brace 7 close brace, and then the other format that I'm using is s at number 7. You can use both of these. Now, what this number 7 does is if I go from the beginning, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, I'm at O. So essentially, I'm saying, hey, go to the position 7. So positions, that integer that I was talking about, that's the position number of a character in the string, and I'll put that. Or I say S at 7. It's still 7, right? Which is O. Let me go ahead and run it and see what it does. See? In both cases, it was O. Change that to 9, right? L. So that's how the subscript or the position um, operator works. So this S at position 7, well, S at position 7, I called it S at, and even this is S at position 9. So play around with it. Pretty soon you'll get the hang of it. It's straightforward, but a very useful command for strings. Uh, so think of the string as just all these characters in different position, right? And each one of these position has a number. If I would have done S1, what do you think is going to happen? Oh ha, it's E. You might be thinking it's H. Well, the way the numbering works is the first character is at 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So that's how it works. So they start off at 0. H, H. Okay, that's another thing to keep in mind with these strings. Okay, so now let me go ahead and walk you through another program. In this program, what I have done is I have two strings. One is called the original string, and it's initialized to string in lowercase. And then there is string transform string. which isn't initialized to anything. And here you can use a while loop, you can do while loop, but I'll use mine for a for loop. So I go from int I equals to 0, and as long as it's less than the length, and if you remember, length is this will give us the length of the string. I keep incrementing I by 1. Okay? And then here I say transform string, which is this string which wasn't initialized, equal to transform string plus static cast to char. Now what am I doing here? I say to upper original string at I. So when you start off at 0. So original string at I is going to be S, and it's going to loop through all the way to E. And it's going to static cast that to char because if you remember to upper method, what does it return? It returns an ASCII code. I don't want the ASCII code. I want the actual character. So I static cast it and then I append it to the transform string. So as and when I'm going through this for loop, it's going to go through it as many number of times equal to the length of the string. And every time it's going to append something to the transform string. And what's going to happen is at the beginning you had the original string. The transform string should have the same thing in this, except all of it should be in uppercase. Comment this out. That was for another example that I'll get to. You see this? After for loop, string in lowercase, right? Which is the original string right here. And you look at the transform string, all of that is in uppercase. Okay, so now that we've got the transform string, I'm gonna uncomment this line over here. I'm using the at, and what I'm going to do is I'm gonna say I want to access the character at position number string length plus 5. So whatever that length of the string is plus 5. Now theoretically I'm accessing something that's beyond the bound of the character. Let's see what happens. Uh-oh. Terminate called after throwing an instance of out of range. So I was calling something beyond its length, which is out of range. In this case, length was 20, and I was saying, what's the character at 25? So that's why this call terminated. So this is something for you to be careful of, as and when you're manipulating these strings, accessing them. Um, you'll come across situations where accidentally you might have accessed the string character, which is out of bound, and you'll get an error like this. So just be watchful of that. Um, nothing else. Okay. So hopefully this example is clear now. You should know about the um, string at a particular position. Transformation of string. What else? Yeah, it's the same thing right here, and some manipulation of the input or guidance to the user. Okay. Next up is the exceptions. Okay. So when it comes to exception, one thing we saw was when we tried to do this. Um, let's do this here. When we tried to do the access and out of bound index for the string, we saw an exception that happened there. Alright, so when I tried to do this, F5 it threw an exception. That's what essentially it did. Now, that was an exception what you saw. Now, the way to go about handling that is having a try and a catch block. So if you know something might be problematic, you put a try around it and then you catch. In this case, I know that it's going to be out of range exception. So after the try, I catch and the type of exception is out of range. And I give it an exception EX, right? And then here, I say exception caught and I output what the exception is. So that's the syntax of it. Let me go ahead and run it. What do you think should happen? It should catch the exception and um, and then continue with the program. Let's do this to kind of illustrate the point. Now, I'll comment this out. We'll watch what happens. And I'll explain why it happens. This was supposed to be outside. Okay, now watch. Terminate called after throwing an instance of this. That's what the exception was. And you would never see the program continue. So the program unexpectedly exited and then never did continue. Whereas if I have this try catch method, take that out. Now watch what happens. Ah, voila. You see the program continues and I have caught the exception successfully and then I output what the exception was. I say exception caught and that's the exception. A lot of times what happens is sometimes you won't know, so you will now output what type of exception that was caught. In my case, I knew there's a possibility that could be out of bounds, so I put a try catch and I caught that out of range exception. So anytime you have problematic code or you think might be problematic, might throw an exception, go and follow the try catch methodology. Now, in my case, I knew exactly the type of mm, issue I was going to get or the exception I was going to get, and I put out of range there. What if you don't know? Well, we have a solution for it. If you know it's going to throw an exception, but you don't know what type of exception, you can say dot dot dot, and it will catch all different types of exception. There's no one's if it's out of bound, if it's null exception, and so on and so forth. It'll catch any type of it. Watch what happens. I'll run it. Oh, I'm sorry. Uh, I didn't. The EX does not exist. That's why it's complaining. Okay. No, see. See, the program still did continue. It didn't exit abnormally, and I was able to output exception caught and then continue on with the program. That's what you want your program to theoretically do, is after an exception, continue the program. Don't abort unexpectedly or have a core dump. Core dump you'll see come later on, and I'll get into it. But just so you know, anytime the program exits unexpectedly, uh, there'll be a core dumped, um, a memory issue, and there's a file consists of binary. And if someone were to look at it, if they can read it, they'll know where the program failed and what happened. But for practical purposes, know that if there is something unexpected that happened, uh, you might get a core dump. So in this scenario, I was able to, I was tried accessing something out of bounds, and I caught the exception. So we saw how you can catch all types of exception or a specific type of exception. Okay, hopefully that was clear. So that's all from today's lecture. And if, like I said, or like I say always before, if you have any questions, feel free to bug me, and I'll be able to help you out. But still covering all the cool stuff, strings and exceptions. Exceptions you'll find exceptionally useful when programming. Okay, have yourself a good afternoon or good evening, whatever time you're watching this, and I'll see you next class.